Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Dr. Richard Allan Miller. I hear him making all that racket over there. Mister, you're typing really loud.
Sorry.
I'm just teasing you. I heard you, though. But yeah, thank you, and welcome back, and what a fabulous show. I really appreciate being up here tonight at this late hour. And so tell us a little bit about, I know you've never written a biography about yourself, right?
No, not yet. I have. I've had several incarnations this time around. You know, I was military when I came out. I was a high school whiz kid. In college, I was a whiz kid. Most people don't realize I did an undergraduate thesis for my Bachelor of Science in Physics rather than philosophy of physics. I graduated with a BS, and during my junior and senior year, I took extra credits. Instead of working, I went down into the lower basement of physics building and learned how to use a Bridgeport mill and built the first plasma jet, which at that time had been speculated, but nobody had actually built one. And that my actual device, it took me all summer to make it, ended up at Giannini, which makes all the space tiles for the shuttle. What I did is I created a flame. It was about 16 inches long that was 60 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And it was a true plasma with a sheath on it. And so I put magnetic fields on it and could turn it and make it into a nut, and it wouldn't mix with itself. And then I took a tungsten rod and put it into the tip of the flame, and it blew the tungsten off into a vapor at 1 angstrom. And that's why they could make space tiles once I'd made that. And really, I remember there were a couple of professors that were afraid I was going to blow up the campus because it had this huge power thing. And what happened was when we turned it on, the entire Washington State University went down into about a brownout. And bing, the plasma formed. And once I had the plasma, it took nothing to contain it. It was like contained easily with magnetic fields, and I could do all kinds of things. And today, that was in 1965. And I remember today, Boeing has a magnetic monopole. And that means it's a super cavitation device and a torus twistor space where it turns into itself. That's how you make a magnetic monopole. Most people don't understand that. It's kind of a into the out of kind of thing. And like cavitation, what cavitation is that when you have a pool of water and a drop falls at some distance into the water, it creates a series of waves moving outward. At the same time, it creates a series of waves moving toward each other. And if you want to do a metaphor, they slap, and a form of film of water captures and surrounds a ball of air. And that ball of air, because of the water's magnetic structure with the exclusion zone, H3O2, it creates the space to create a torus where the air is turning inside out on itself. I'll send you a little picture because once you have a visual of that, and do you post things?
I can put things in chat. Is it a link?
Okay, didn't give this one. This is a nice one for chat.
Okay.
We're going to do, let me figure out where I'm going here for just 1 second. The reason I want to show you this is because the picture of it, you immediately understand how cavitation works. Basically, the space of air turns inside out on itself, and that's where cold fusion energy. It was first.
So that's the key right there, cold fusion energy.
Well, it is, and what they're doing, they have. Lockheed came out? There is the National Ignition Facility. I'm looking for structured water here. Dr. Jerry Pollack, who wrote the first phase of water. There you go. That's the picture I wanted for you. That was the guy that hired me in 1970 when Boeing lost the B-1 contract, and I was like 50,000 other physicists. We hit the streets in one day. And I remember there was a sign with the last person out of town, please turn off the lights. And Jerry was the physicist that hired me to work under him. I didn't work for him. I had higher security clearance. I worked around the hall. But Jerry was the guy in 1970 that when I needed a Bridgeport mill, he'd know where I could get one on campus. And so I did things all over campus. I worked in physics. I was mostly in anesthesiology, which is medical, and that was separated from physics. Physics was underground and had to have security clearances. I could go in there. I grew crystals and did all kinds of weird things.
Oh, nice.
Nettemeyer, Dr. Nettemeyer was in professor there. He's one of the ones from the Manhattan Project that invented the trigger for a fission bomb.
Did you work on that or no?
I'm sorry?
Did you work on the Manhattan Project?
No, not me. I'm not that old. I'm younger.
Okay.
I didn't work for Teller. I studied. Nettemeyer, actually, who did work for Teller, did some projects with me. He'd give me graduate students when I was doing projects for Oak. Now, Oak originally back then was a think tank that I had developed for Princeton, Boeing, and Battelle and Douglas United Nuclear, Battelle Northwest. Basically, I was part of Cohen's original think tank at Princeton. I was a whiz kid. I was the youngest one on the think tank, and what they wanted me to do was set up similar to what they'd had at Princeton in Seattle, and that was at the Boeing Scientific Research Laboratories in South Park, before it was known later as the Space Center in Kent. And I was working with Art Pilgrim, with Lunar Base Alpha 1, and setting up all kinds of different projects when Boeing had to lay off everybody. And we were all unemployed in 1970. And so immediately Jerry hired me, and that's when I started SEAL projects. And that was what we call SEAL Corporation out of Amherst. And later, because of my papers that I had developed in 73 in Prague, working with the SEALs and that kind of thing, I then got to be hired by the smoking man himself, which was Dr. Carl Schleicher. And I worked with him until 1979. Howard Stone right now is the one running MRU. It still exists. It's not what it was. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we were the bottom line. It was basically Navy intelligence. I worked directly under Old Man DuPont. When I came out of undergraduate school and went back east, I worked immediately at the Experimental Research Station in Wilmington, and then they moved me into Newark, and I became an instrumentation specialist, and that's where I did my graduate work.
Nice.
Delaware. And really, I worked under R.B. Murray, who was a Nobel Prize winner that was reverse engineering microtechnology that we had found. There was Sandia was there, and Bell Labs, of course. And so Lucent Technologies came in later, but I was the whiz kid that they were grooming to work for Schleicher eventually, that did all the original works in bioluminescence and those fields of Schumann's resonance, whatever. Nice. I worked in microwave, so I did mind control studies.
Right. And how did you get your targets? I'd like to know how you recruited people to experiment on.
I didn't do that. That was later.
Sure. Yeah.
That was later. What I was doing. No, see.
Okay, well, you were working on the technology, but who were the lab rats? Where did you find them? Or you were part of that?
Myself or whatever.
Okay, all right.
Well, and we had dogs.
Dogs?
Yeah, anesthesiology. We worked with dogs.
Wow.
Before you work with humans, that's a real big issue now. I threw a doctor out of my lab once by the scruff of his neck and his ass, and I just threw him out of my office. And that Larry Lindblom, they remember that. Jerry laughs about that event because that man was, when I was working on the aortic catheter, we could do an experiment on a dog, not hurt the dog. And that doctor would then stretch the limits to see what the limits were for the killing that animal. And it was like abusive. Oh. And it wasn't what I went to graduate school for. Right. And was not the way I do business. And when he walked into my lab, I just threw him out.
Good for you.
Medical doctors are not what you think they are. They little petty people that worry about who's got what cloak closet. You want to talk about discipline. The top of the heap is physics and it then slides down to either mathematics or engineering. And medicine is down that troop down there somewhere in terms of rigor and discipline. And when you're not disciplined, how are you going to be spiritual?
I agree. That's so well
there
said.
it is. That's the part of it of minding yourself.
That's the missing link, too, because they're not disciplined. A lot of people today and these divisions are not disciplined.
They're sloppy. And the bottom line is honesty is the truest form of health there is.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you.
There it is. Read it and wait. If you want to be healthy, be honest.
Yep.
And if you're honest, none will say no. You're doing your true will.
Right.
There are people like counterintelligence is lying by omission. In other words, the media will tell you the truth, but only give you a limited perspective of it that would cause you to have inference of probabilities of things happening. Right. But if you think with your truth doesn't lie in information. It lies in your gut and has nothing to do with knowledge.
I agree.
That is a really important lesson that I had to learn as king of knowledge. I had to learn that there's something more important going on here, and it's not about knowledge.
Right.
Knowledge is the part you get to take with you to have wisdom. And really, this is my last incarnation. I don't have to come back. And I got it because I had a fifth lane master look me in the eye at the moment of my death. He said to me, looked me in the eye, and he said at the moment of my death that he personally would be there to take me across the abyss.
Nice.
He said, be sure you have 2 coins in your pocket.
That's right. You have to pay the ferryman, right?
Just kidding.
Are you going underground? I tease you. I want to ask you really quick. You do have a stellar resume, by the way. It's fascinating. So what about the smoking man? Can you elaborate on him a little bit, that person?
Dr. Carl Schleicher.
Yeah.
Was probably an alien who would sit at the same desk in Wisconsin Avenue for 48 years.
Nice job.
He was in charge of the Clone Wars. He was the one.
Okay, hold on for a second. What were the Clone Wars?
Oh, well.
Can you talk about it?
See, I'm not really all the military. What they did, to respond to your question, is they broke up battlefields. And when anything paranormal showed up on the West Coast, it was mine. In the Midwest, it was Dr. Wilbur Franklin. And anything on the East Coast, it's Dr. Carl Schleicher. The Clone Wars are the concept of walk-ins and what's going on another level.
Oh, great.
Yeah, good luck.
Wait a second. I mean, I understand walk-ins very well. I've worked around that a lot. So what are you saying? Why don't you elaborate for me a little bit?
Well, no, that's your area of expertise.
Oh, you brat. Come on, man. You don't want to tell us anymore?
Whirling dervish. And when I was in Turkey and I was watching this guy dancing, going up on his tips like ballet, and it was beautiful. And all of a sudden, the sword came out, and he's swinging the sword like he's in battle, like you say in the Chinese ballet of martial arts. And all of a sudden, he's swinging the sword around, and he throws it right through his chest. He's sticking out the other side. He lifts his hands, he continues dancing around, pulls the sword out, and there's no wound.
Interesting.
Now, I've seen that with individuals like Jack Schwartz. Schwartz was a guy he later had the Alethea Foundation out of Ashland Heart Center, but he was out of Portland. He was one of these true paranormals where he could take a large needle and stick it through his arm and stop the bleeding. And if you don't think the military want to know how to do that, I'll tell you, man, that was what the Manager Foundation was all about. We set up a biofeedback laboratory there, and we started testing to find out what's going on with autonomic functions.
Right.
Now, there are other weird people that I've seen and met. I did James Hurtak, of course. That was with the Edgar Mitchell Apollo 14 mission studies. There was what is this out of the Korean? Keith Milton Reinhardt. And that's where Helmut Schmidt came out of Boeing and built that random generator for me. I saw Keith Milton Reinhardt do a billet reading. We documented. I have the actual recordings of that. He did it for 102 people. And what a billet is that you write a question on a piece of paper and you put it in your pocket. And then he's supposed to ask the question and give you the answer. And okay, that's what's called a billet reading. And he only missed 2 out of 102 people. 100 of us got, okay, mine. What he did with me was I wrote down, prove to me that you're not reading my mind.
Nice.
And I put it in my pocket. And he said to me, go to your mother's bedroom in a hope chest at the front of her bed. There will be a letter at the bottom of the chest that was written before you're born.
Interesting.
He said that, and I did that, and there it was.
How is he retrieving his data? Do you know?
Well, there's something else going on. He had, the Akashic records, the big book.
But he wasn't taking dictation from some type of artificial intelligence, was he?
He did what we call PK phenomena rather than ESP. And what PK is outside the body, like remote viewing, is to be disposed differently than astral projection. Now, teleportation and apportation, he was big on apportations. He'd have these events where he would start pouring gems out of his mouth. And I'm talking about millions of dollars.
Wow, that's interesting.
Out of his mouth, just out of ectoplasm. He used to cough it out, and out come a ruby and the diamonds and other things like that. Yeah, he did that for years in a thing in Seattle called the Aquarian Foundation. It still exists. Now, there are mutants in the world that have special abilities, just like in the movies, the X-Men or whatever they call that. But I was part of when Dr. Rind retired from Duke University. They moved his laboratories across the street into a frat house called the Foundation for the Study of Men. And that was where they took all those special children, Firestarter, whatever. I did a stint in there. They discovered that I was what they call a 4th stage telepath. And that's that means that I can, when I ramp up, can change the reality of everybody around me to maybe 4.5, 5 blocks. I can change the reality.
You should make everybody multi-billionaires then.
What's that?
Can you make everybody a multi-billionaire around you?
You already are.
Okay, it's good.
You already are. It's not going to be about money. So a billionaire of what?
While we're at it, let's buy America back.
Virus and crud all over. You got 1 billion of those on you. What is that? Yeast and candidas, whatever. You got 1 billion. There it is. I just gave it to you.
What that?
Well, magic, when you do it for the wrong things, the wrong intent, what happens next is you get your wish, but not quite the way you wanted it.
Yeah, I don't like that part.
Well, for example, if you wanted $50,000 and you burn some candles and do, what happens next is a truck hits you and you get it while you're in the hospital.
Oh, that's not good.
Well, no.
That's kind of a strange way to function.
That's what they call high magic. If you do, the purpose is to increase your awareness spiritually. It doesn't matter what it's going to cost.
Well, the universe is rich anyway.
That's the part you get to take with you. And so keep your eye on the ball on what's important to you. It's different for each of us. Make that list. Start with a diary. You need to form a dialogue of vocabulary in the way your higher self is trying to talk to you. If you can form knowledge and conversation, that is the purpose of pathworking and the systems of magic known as high magic. And in terms of trying to find union with self, that's only halfway to God.
True. So you actually were booted up on a technological level too, weren't you? Well, or you had a technological...
Because it's got to have physical analog. If you're going to be spiritual, it has a physical representation. Your body is your temple. And so there is a metaphor there. If you want to look at like going to a fat doctor, how does that work? He can't fix himself. What's going on here? That's the deal. Walking your talk, and it will have physical analogs. And that's what you're seeking. And that's your confirmation, because most of us hang out in the physical plane, so we need to see it from that point of view. It certainly isn't a new car.
Well, what's interesting is that we have all this technology. We have all sorts of things in the black programs that would just completely blow everybody out of the water here. And yet we're living like a third world country, and we're so backwards. And it makes me wonder why we didn't just go ahead and transcend everything simultaneously and let go of all this limitation.
Well, if time isn't real, and it isn't, you already have, just because you can conceive of it. That's how it starts. The very fact that you can hold it in your imagination as a goal allows you toward that center. Every star is different. How did Crowley put it? Every man and every woman is a star. And then Robert Anton Wilson added, yes, and everyone wants to be a czar.
Oh, interesting.
I like Bob Wilson, man.
Nice little riddle there.
Well, he was only third degree in OTO, so get a grip. I mean, but I was Simon Moon in his books. I was the one that brought him into LA Lodge. I met him when he was a stringer for the Playboy, and showed him the way.
The stories you could tell, I'm sure, right?
Well, we're all blind. I had some pretty good teachers. I was really lucky. Back then, I was studying with Helen Parsons Smith and Mildred Burlingame and Phyllis Seckler. Phyllis Seckler had me write for In the Continuum, the first editions for the College of Thelema. I was one of the first writers in there. Awesome. And I started with a holographic concept of reality, because quantum consciousness isn't going to get you anywhere. Indeterminacy, the more you know about one thing, the less you know about another. That means I need to go to a higher level of resolution.
Right. And how do you get there?
There you go. That's how you do it.
How did you get there?
Drugs.
Did you really?
I'm kidding.
Seriously?
Well, no. Okay. I explored and found, there's shortcuts. Drugs are absolutely a form of magic. But that's one of the reasons why Crowley was out of sync with his universe and died as a drug addict in Hastings.
What was he taking?
A teacher.
What kind of drugs did he use?
He was a heroin, like in Tombstone with the laudanum. People didn't have an accurate definition of addiction back then. It was just, wow, look what you're doing to yourself. And there was value systems that had not yet been articulated psychologically. And so today, Scientific American says addiction is simply a bad habit. That means you can correct anything easily. Right. And you can reprogram things. There's a drug called ibogaine, comes from the sacred vine iboga, that will stop all forms of addiction with one single use. That would include spousal abuse and gambling, which means it's not a site-selective molecule. Lotsoff had originally discovered it. They took a 16-year IV user off of Amsterdam Park and in a 30-hour intake, clinically administering this terrible, terrible drug to him. At the end of the day, he's sitting there doing an outtake with the doctor and about his addictions, and he started to light up a cigarette, and he doesn't smoke anymore. 80% of the people that take ibogaine stop all forms of addiction with one single use. Now, how does it work? Well, there are some French philosophers and scientists that have come up with the idea of a new brainwave called a PGO wave in the occipital region of the cerebral cortex. That's that boot up auto-eject bat file that when you get up out of bed in the morning and you go pee, you got to put your toothpaste on the toothbrush before the toilet clears. That's those little rituals that we play with ourselves determine our addictions. And by simply changing those little games that we play with ourselves, it so changes the addiction, and that is called a PGO wave. It takes approximately, like Crowley put it, 3 periods of the moon to change a habit. That means for 3 months, you have to be active, proactive, in reminding, little notes on the refrigerator, you're fat, that kind of thing. If you want to change a habit, including drug addiction or gambling, It's going to take about 3 months of active participation. It's simple. It's as simple as that. It isn't because you didn't get laid 2 years ago. It's not about that kind of thing. It's a bad habit. And once you get it, and gambling in some ways is worse than drug addiction because I couldn't spend that much money in drugs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, get a grip. It's I went through all of that as a self-realization, coming to a center with myself so that I had a sense of what I'm really truly all about. Drugs are a shortcut. And like all shortcuts are to grandma's house through the woods, there are big bad wolves. And so you take risks when you try to do shortcuts. That's the difference between taking 30 years to find bliss in meditation or using it with brain drivers in two. Now, once you get there, like changing and being able to consciously change an addiction or, an allergy, changing it, your response to allergies is simple. But you have to understand how the parasympathetic nervous system works and its release of histamines. Once you do that, it's like snake bite. There's a 10-minute window between exposure to a pollen and your body's response. And in that 10-minute window, if you lay down and put a cold compress across your eyes and nose and start to try to go into a light alpha state, you will slow the histamine relationship down. And the next time you're exposed to that, you won't even have a symptom. And you just reprogram your response coefficient to different kinds of stimuli. It's training. It's training. It's discipline.
Yeah, it's all about consciousness too.
Yeah.
That's what you're dealing
Intent,
with.
what you want and why. And to know yourself clear enough to know when you're into self-destruct. And why is that?
Yeah, exactly. Can you define the brain drivers a little bit?
Brain drivers are started with frequency following function, hemisync, holosync. Basically, you're driving 40 cycle in one ear and 48 cycle in the other, and you'll go down into a theta state, 8 cycle, or an alpha state. Yeah.
Did you use frequency, like high-pitched frequencies at all in the ears at all?
40 cycle, something you can hear like hum.
But it wouldn't be sounding like a high-pitched frequency, would it?
What's that?
You wouldn't use anything that would sound like a really high frequency?
You can use raindrops. That's what most of them do, like center point. Center point with an E at the end.com. Watch out for that site. If you're going to go there, I'd lurk. It's got a bunch of Scientologists that are trolling for you. But there's others like Kelly Howell, Theater of the Mind out of Albuquerque. Some of her stuff is exceptional. And then, of course, there's Robert Monroe's Institute now in North Carolina that, does hemisync, holosync, hemisync. It's a frequency following function. It was one of the training things I trained Navy SEALs with, and I write about it in Power Tools. There are places to get those. They can be used for different kinds of things. One of the cautions I will tell you that if you use brain drivers, probably after the second week, you may go through a period of what is called a bifurcation where your brain resets itself. And when you do that, there'll be without drugs, you will experience an LSD-like high for approximately 4 or 5 hours. It scared the hell out of me when I went in. I just all of a sudden, my reality started changing. What was happening is that my brain was resetting itself from some skew that it had previously had by probably the way I was birthed. Just kidding.
So is that dangerous then?
Trauma.
Would the brain drivers be dangerous then?
No.
Okay.
No, not. They're actually extremely healthy because what they'll do is put you into lower brain states where a lot of important things happen that do not happen in conscious awareness. When you're asleep and you have different kinds of REM sleep and dreaming, this is where you can set up knowledge bases and intelligence in your awarenesses. This is a place of fertileness to learn a language. You're playing a foreign language while you're semi-asleep. It goes into subconscious, and there's a lot of learning curves that can be accelerated using these techniques in harmony with the way your body works. Everybody's a little different. Keep a diary. A diary is the bottom line. I've mentioned it several times. Ira Progoff wrote, on honest journaling, and it's the bottom line for how you form your own dialogue to talk to self. And it's like Babel. Every single one of us does it differently. Some of us, like myself, I'm very fortunate. I came out of the crib talking to myself. They thought I was really weird. But talking to yourself, and everybody knows what I'm saying, because I'm actually speaking on a higher level. And everybody's a little different. And once you get the dialogue form, it's a richness I cannot begin to express. That is, we're taking personal responsibility for your evolution. What you're trying to do is find a way that you can talk to your higher self and be a student, or, listen to what it has to say in terms of what it wants you to do. If you can tap into that place, that's where you get it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, totally. And some people would meditate to do that, but there are other ways to do it. Obviously, you can set the intent probably to make the connection, I would say.
Yeah, someone hit me with a number 8 flat iron skillet, and I got it.
There you go. That'll hurt.
I'm left with that movie, and I can't remember what it is, but this guy ends up coming home with a woman he doesn't want to, and he sleeps with her. And the next morning, she's coming out of the bathroom saying, "What do you think about the Lord Jesus Christ?" And then he sees her as an old lady hitting her head with a frying pan.
Goodness.
Religions are for fellowship. And I sense the fall of the Catholic Church, like the last Pope, and that at some point we're going to realize that fellowship is part of helping you find your own center. Mm-hmm. I used to use fellowship for churches to play baseball. I really enjoyed playing with other people like that. It wasn't about praying together. They have in Hindu Minayana and Hinayana yogas, where you do it in group or you do it separately. I've like I said, there's several ways to God. You either go androgynous or with your mate, and it's at the lovers and the hermit. And the path that crosses them, that connects the two, is humor. You've got to always keep things in perspective. You're never going to get out of this thing alive. You've got to laugh your way through it. Mm-hmm. Actually, there's some excellent movies on that concept, where it would suggest that the physical plane is actually where we go to be sick spiritually. And that once we wake up death, we go back home into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like we were actually on some kind of a warped timeline right now. To me, it doesn't seem right.
I agree to experiment on some undergraduate thesis on tickling or whatever humor. I mean, we're in an experiment and we volunteered. The key is to remember what you were doing in a past life and then to pick up where you left off. Mm-hmm. And that's called magical memory.
I like that.
Okay. Yeah, right.
That makes sense. I've done that actually. So great. Magical me. So where do we go from here?
I can get creepy on the new geo weapons that I'm.
Oh, let's get creepy. We're heading towards sour pretty soon.
Okay, well, I've talked about this weapon, and I'll send you here. I'll try to see if I can. Oh, you're gonna love this for your chat room. This is what I'm doing this tomorrow morning, actually, in Chicago, and it's with James Jensic. And wait a minute, I'm looking for.
You're busy.
I'm sorry?
You're busy with these radio shows. That's great.
Well, this one, here we are, here it comes, is about
is that a picture?
A new weapon that we have that is now being deployed everywhere. How they actually ignite the bomb. If you want to go to the National Ignition Facility in Livermore, they have built a 65-foot demo of a buckyball, which is 1.2 nanometers, and they're I'm writing. I'm just stalling while I get here it is, right there. This paper was just released by the Navy. It is a type of teleportation device where they can now tunnel a laser beam into the center of a buckyball. Now, what a buckyball is 60 carbon atoms. You can have 70 or 120 carbon atoms, but the 60 forms a buckyball, and it will just hold 23 deuterium and tritium heavy waters. And what they do then is they port the laser beam inside it, and the deuterium goes critical. And then what happened is controlled fusion, with the geodesic sphere being a strong enough vessel to contain that kind of energy. That originally was being developed at MIT by Mark Leclerc in his works on cavitation and that water turning inside out. This thing in the deuterium does a different thing called super cavitation. You can look that up on Wikipedia, and it uses in fluid dynamics simple Euler's equation divided by 2. And when you take these fullerene deuterium mini bombs, you form nanotubes. And the nanotubes they're at least 100 times stronger structurally than diamond. It's a different form of carbon in its relationship to itself, and it will trap certain things. Now, the original uses of this had to do with some Russian experiments where they were giving lethal doses of radiation to rats, feeding them this fullerene water, and there was a 95% recovery because the fullerene nanotubes acted like shungite, acted like a type of super antioxidant. Mm-hmm. And these nanotubes would go after specific structured isotopes and heavy metals and isolate them from the body. Now, instead, what they're probably going to do is put them in geoengineering into that polymer that they're using to control the weather, and put this fullerene bomb inside each of us. And then you have a weapon called a bio-API, where the good Captain Kirk inhabits the bad Captain Kirk and discovers that the bad Captain Kirk has a weapon where he can pull someone's picture up on a screen and they disappear.
Cool.
That is shortly.
That's fascinating.
It's creepy is what it is.
It's creepy. Can you do that with a planet?
You might be able to do it to a whole bunch of fallen angels. I don't know how that works. My guess is the fact that we have nuclear weapons at various ley lines across America would suggest that demons that might use that as a hollow earth, where the earth itself has a middle earth, just like in mythology, where it cavitates.
So they're strategically positioned along the ley lines? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's for sure? Okay.
That's going to freak out higher and lower planes big time. See, it's our way of last form of defense, and yet attacking on a physical plane means it involves us. And so that's the place where we have to wake up and move to the next level.
Well, there really is a battle.
The way Kurzweil and others have done this is with the so-called transhumanism movement and the Avatar program. Mm-hmm. And basically, NASA, everybody is predicting now that there will be no life on Earth by 2050, that Fukushima, for example, for our kind of life form was an extinction event. There are life forms that thrive in this high-end ionizing radiation. Mm-hmm. The black slime mold came from galactic center probably. But I'll tell you, you can change everything with your mind's eye. And so the battle for this is to take charge of the imaging and realize that all of us are in the same boat, and I don't get out of here until you get your part done. And every single one of us has a part to do in this. Every single one of us. And if you don't do it this lifetime, no worries. You get to come back.
Well, I'm not coming
Because,
back. I'm breaking
well,
orbit.
yeah, so the way I'm doing it is that I'm seeing myself as the world. And as I change myself, I am going to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's going to work for you too. We are all one, and I am the walrus.
Well, you don't look like a walrus.
No, but I got the big mustaches, I'll tell
I
you.
tease you.
And
But yeah, that's where they're heading, though. You're right about that with the transhumanism and the Avatar program for sure.
it's creepy. And
Well, yeah, it takes your
simple,
spirit away. It spirits you away, energetically speaking. I mean, you're dealing with artificial intelligence interface and a subhuman kind of lifestyle, I guess.
it's not what I signed up for. It's not my cup of tea. And when a person in authority tells me to go do something I don't believe in, like kill someone, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I can conscientiously object, and I'll march to the sea for my salt first.
Right. Well, it's too bad there's conflict to begin with. That's my biggest thing is it's just too bad there's all this conflict coming from all these different dimensional spaces, whether it's a fragmented collective of conscious or whatever. It's just so sad sometimes when you think about it.
Or you could see it differently as half full and suggest that they're running scared, and that's why there's so much of it right now.
I think you're right about that. I think they're terrified, and I think they're running so much interference to drag us down into the drama of the linear.
We're now all seeing the reality of it, and that's why they've lost right out of the gate. Once you say it, it's a done deal.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, big time. So that would explain their behavior for sure. And we've got about 15 minutes left here, plus or minus, but I want everybody, once again, to know how they can get your books and also your website. Let's give them a rundown of all your stuff.
Sure. Well, I have a bunch of books. I have several careers. One of the things I do is I network rural communities and bunkers for congressmen. I'm setting up networks like ebarterbank.net and things like permacredits.com, community-supported agriculture, setting up networks for barter. And so I was going to say earlier, seek your joy, what you do best, and that's what you have to barter. And there will be people that will need your skills. And do what you love, because that's where you belong, is in bliss and then joy. That's why the Quakers placed it so high. My books are in agriculture, physics, and metaphysics, like The Modern Alchemist, which is on Jungian psychotherapy. It's a step-by-step process of how to personal transformation, all the steps you have to go through. Folie à deux, where you go with your boyfriend down that crazy lane. Actually, you can get them at Richard Allan Miller, ALAN Miller.com, and oak-publishing.com. If you go to oak-publishing, it will take you back to Richard Allan Miller. I use PayPal. My books are on Amazon. It turns out Amazon is a worse crook for bookstores and small publishers like myself. It's terrible. They can sell my book cheaper than I can. I don't know how that works. So Amazon, and it isn't from me. We did orders and discovered that Amazon's got lots of weird nooks and crannies, used books. There are people selling my stuff for more money. And if you write to me, I'll respond and give you free things that I have. I'm going to, as I get my website up, richardallanmiller.com, I have a blog. I do have Facebook presence. I noticed that you're there all the time for me, Solaris, and I really appreciate it. Well, I have certain issues or areas that I try to stay current on, and I'm certain that you have a bunch of lead scouts that do it in different areas. The nice part about me is I'm what they call a polymath. I'm one of the few people in history that have a multiple dimensions of information in agriculture. I'm the postman. I mean, that's what I do is farm. That's what I've done for 35 years. Before I was military working in laboratories, and now I'm just a grumpy old man in armchair physics. I don't have any toys anymore. It would be lovely to be able to go out and bust a bunch of this crap. Ebola, for example, is not airborne. So what are we talking about here? If it's not airborne, then it's not Ebola if it's spreading.
Yep, exactly.
So, and there's swine flu. There's going to be a couple of other creepy things, with Bayer, aspirin, and some of the other big companies that are trying to mess up with immunization. Just stay away from immunization. It's crazy.
It is. And we have a question. It looks like there was a question in the chat from Mama Jin. Was this guy part of the Men Who Stares at Goats program?
No, that was later by Army. And that's typical of what Army did when they stared at goats. The wrong goat died, and a general tried to run through a wall and didn't make it because he had the wrong mental attitude. Get me a break. That's the way CIA and Army would take the original technologies of the evil eye. That would be the Navy way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the evil eye. Hoodoo. I'll tell you, the Army thing is not a joke, but staring at a goat will cause them to get upset anyway. We already know about animal contact. Like dogs move their tail is the way they talk. There are about 10 different moves that a dog does that tells you what's going on with the dog. In other words, he doesn't have the complexity of emotions that you do, but he has them more deeply, and his tail is the way he communicates them. Mm-hmm. And so you can watch his tail, which way it's moving. You can see what he's trying to say.
That's very true.
Well, yeah. Animal whispering. My ex-wife, Iona, calls herself a spy whisperer. Iona. Yeah. It's interesting to realize that I was there in the initial things. It was not as glamorous as everybody makes it out now. Oh, wow. Tell me about the smoking man. He was a grumpy old man that was on the edge. He was a full bird colonel and worked for the Navy at that time. And it was Navy Intel, and we reported directly to old man DuPont. And back then, DuPont reported to Rockefeller. DuPont was in charge of technology. Now, all of that changed in the 80s. And that's when Monsanto, which was a small weapons company, and DuPont then became a transnational corporation and was larger than DuPont. And today, I thank you all for your vote. Monsanto has lost over $600 million this last quarter. Goodbye.
Yay.
Don't worry. It's like Hydra. There'll be another head that will come up out of the ashes.
Yeah, no kidding. That's true, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize they were back in the 80s like that. Monsanto, you said?
Well, the 80s, the change from the 70s to the 80s was the difference between in the 70s when I was doing it with Blue Sky. We had no idea where we were going to go, and that was okay because it was fertile ground. In the 80s, it was no longer about the advancement of man. It was about marketing. Mm-hmm. And so it was application. If you didn't have an application, you didn't get your grant for it.
That's interesting.
That's where the transnational corporations came in, is in the 80s. And it changed technology. And after that, there was no interest in science in the advancement of man. It was about science in the control of man.
Yep. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, it's all weaponized, every bit of it, unfortunately. Yeah, what's the point anymore, right?
So that's, what's it good for? Absolutely. Well, that's why they're trying to do it now. It's all a banker thing. It isn't going to work. I would not recommend the United States be involved in anything. I'm not saying isolationism, but with the way the news reporting is happening, you know that you don't know what actually is happening in Syria. And so why would you then reluctantly agree to bomb it anyway? And that is the whole purpose concept of Statanism and the idea that the state has more rights than the individual and is the law and order. That once you have a badge, you're not responsible for your actions. Mm-hmm. And that part is what's wrong right now with the whole concept of a state.
I agree. Totally. Yeah, and I don't see it flipping around the other way.
Well, let's put it this way. If someone points a gun at you to tell you to go shoot somebody and you didn't even vote for that person, how can they order you to do something you don't believe in. Now, what's wrong with that image?
Yeah, everything. It's control, manipulation, or bullying.
Well, that's what it's stated. It's all about the idea of armed response, and it's okay for them. Their laws are different than our laws. It's okay.
Two worlds in collision, basically.
Well, yeah, the idea of Baghdad airport was not done by a tactical nuke. It was this new fullerene weapon. And Building 7, when it came down in 9/11, left there was no debris. It was a slag. And really, jet fuel, they tried to blame it on jet fuel. And from a physics point of view, newsflash, neither thermite nor jet fuel engine is hot enough to concrete slag. And really, afterwards, that 617-foot beam that then fell after Building 7, where you watch the beam fall down and dissolve in space. As it was doing that, there is only one weapon. I did it when I was in undergraduate school. That's a plasma.
How did you conjure the plasma?
I'm sorry?
How did you conjure the plasma?
I had a special electrode, and I ran argon gas through the electrode and then had an extremely high electrical current going across that field with magnetic fields trying to pinch everything down into its center. And what happened next, it went ping, and I had a flame that was a long pencil tube length with the magnetic field that I had, and was literally 60 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And that's a simple plasma with argon.
With an argon laser or just
65, yeah.
Did you work an argon laser? Is that what that was?
No, we had lasers back then, but no, this was a plasma.
Okay.
A plasma is an ionized state that has a sheath around it. Mm-hmm. And the sheath causes the plasma itself to have its own laws in terms of physics inside it. And it's different than gas, solids and liquids. It's the fourth, or what we call the first state of matter. It's ionized. All the molecules are broken down into ions, and you get a kind of field that surrounds that will reject anything. Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful a skin that you can take and tie a knot in the plasma, and it won't mix.
Wow.
It'll keep its uniqueness. You can pull that magnetic field through. You try to just break that thing down, and you can't do it. The magnetic field is not going to be as strong as the sheath is. Mm-hmm. That's the thing about what makes a plasma. And when it gets a temperature like that, now the laws of physics change in terms of cavitation and what's going on in the universe. Space has two kinds of models. There was Hawking's, which was a black and white hole concept, and the newer Roger Penrose, where it's torus twistor space. This is where gravity is seen as a result of space that has been warped. If you take a drum, that's Bessel functions, and you take a very thin plastic, that's a rubber plastic, and you put a large brick in the center of it, it bends space. And that's what mass does to space. And it would appear, because of the space being bent, that when you then dropped a marble, it would fall straight into the thing like gravity, except it doesn't. It starts a circular thing because of Coriolis forces or external other forces that then cause the marble, rather than to fall straight down into the center, it'll go around in a circle as it circles in. And really, gravity is a result of space being bent. That's the theory that I use. Mm-hmm. We don't really know how that all works. There are lots of different models on that. And now with the Bose-Higgins, the Higgs boson that was discovered, that concept now eliminates string theory and makes the suggestion on curved space. Mm-hmm. Richard Feynman and Roger Penrose.
Yeah, it's fascinating. All of it's very fascinating. We're just about out of time here. Richard, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's always a blessing to have you on, and I wish you all the wonderful things in the universe. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mekki coming up next to sail you on into the night from down under. And I think that's about it. And I think he just hung up. That's okay with me. So anyways, I think I'm waiting for the music to kick in here. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And if you want to access any of my books, by the way, they're on Amazon.com, my shows in general. Not my show, excuse me, my books. And then, of course, my website, Night Shadow Anomaly Detective. So, and I think that's about it here. Yeah, he just hung up, so we're good. But anyways, I don't know if you have any questions, and I can't answer them anyway. So that's where we're at with this one. So I think that's about it, you guys. And I'll just wait for the music here for a second. And thank you all for tuning in, by the way, and thank everybody in chat. I see your little comments in there, so thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's nice to see people consistently in there that I kind of recognize now when I poke my head in, so that's kind of fun. All right, everybody, thank you again. I'll see you next week.
Listening to Revolution Radio.